maybe I should start by saying that coming here in January 2023 was actually my first visit to China ever. My entire career as a diplomat for the last 20 years was really elsewhere and not in Asia, and definitely not in East Asia. So in my past, I served in places like the Ivory Coast or Cyprus or San Francisco, and also dealt heavily with the European Union. But really, it's my first experience with China. And I think the one thing that really was impressive for me is the fact that China is so incredibly developed. I'm in Shanghai, which is obviously probably the most developed and far-reaching city in China. But it's pretty incredible to see how fast they're developing here, how rapid everything is. You can see that with the construction of infrastructure, and you can see that with scientific development and economical development. Everything here works fast, and it's quite unique to see that because I'm kind of used to more, I guess, Western bureaucracy that makes things take a little while longer. And the fact that here everything really is rapid. And it's incredibly impressive to see the achievements that have been done here so fast. So it is important to say that there is somewhat of a difference between the relations between China and the Jewish people and China and Israel. But of course, there is also a very important link between the two because Israel is the country of the Jewish people. So if you look back historically, Jewish presence in China started hundreds of years ago, which the most prominent ones were Jews that came from Russia to Harbin, but also there were Jews that came from Iraq into Shanghai. And of course, there is the story of the Second World War, Jews that fled the Holocaust in Europe during the early 1940s. And the only refuge place they could find in the world was Shanghai. About 20,000 Jews from Europe, Austria, Germany, fled Europe from the Nazis that eventually, as you probably know, murdered over a third of the Jewish people, around 6 million people, but 20,000 of them managed to escape. They came here to Shanghai, where they inhabited the region of Hongkong, and lived here, survived here, and really had interesting relations with their Chinese neighbors. It's a very interesting story in the history of the Jewish people, and I would also recommend anyone that is interested in that story to go and visit the museum that tells the story. There is a museum for the Jewish refugees in Shanghai. It is located in Hongkong district. Fascinating, endeavor that was done by the Shanghai municipality, and it's quite remarkable. And you can also, when you're visiting there, try to explore a little the history of the relations between China and Israel. Because, as you may or may not know, Israel was established in 1948. Many of the refugees that came to Shanghai actually ended up in Israel. Some of them went to the US. So I don't think anyone stayed here eventually. But many of them came to Israel, so there are quite a few, second and third generations of these refugees in Israel. But the actual relations between China and Israel all started from, the very establishment of the State of Israel or the very establishment of the modern China in 1949. Israel was one of the first countries to recognize the China in 1949. Of course, many years later, we established diplomatic relations in 1992. And in 1994, our consulate, the consulate in Shanghai, was opened. So this year, we are actually celebrating 30 years for the establishment of the Consul General of Israel in Shanghai. And in the last 32 years or 30 years here in Shanghai, a lot of developments have happened in the relations between Israel and China. Many Chinese experts went to Israel to study medicine, agriculture. We always had kind of an advantage in technological capabilities, and we were always very happy to share them with China. We had wonderful exchanges in the field of academic cooperation, cultural exchanges. There were so many performances that came here to China and to Israel. And we had wonderful relations. We have many sister cities exchanges, for example. Shanghai and the city of Haifa in the northern of Israel are sister cities. And there are other cities in the region, such as Shenzhou, which is a sister city of Netanya, and so on and so forth. So I think historically we share a lot of similarities. The Jewish people and the Chinese people being family-oriented people with 3,000 years of history, a lot of emphasis on education and on family ties. I think that brings us together as people to people. But of course, we can always remember that while the Chinese people are 1.4 billion people, the Jewish nation, the entire Jewish population of the world is around 15 million people. And in Israel, less than 8 million Jews. So we're very small people. Israel is a very small country. So this is the huge difference between the two sides. But we still managed to find a lot of similarities and a lot of connections in the last 32 years. So Jews in China today are a very small number. Majority of them, I think, have left by 1949. So today, I cannot say we have a community in the sense of people that this is an actual community that goes generation backwards. But what we do have is we have a few Jewish centers. Here in Shanghai, we have one. We actually have two. We used to have more, I have to say. During COVID, two of them were closed because a lot of people, as you can expect, had left. And those community centers are service any Jews that live here, or even those that just pass by here. They're over in Gubei, and they really kind of celebrate the Jewish life cycle, because Jewish life cycle is very extensive. We have a lot of holidays, and we have a lot of traditions that come with the holidays. And beside the holidays, we also celebrate and mark Saturday, or Shabbat, as we call it, every weekend. And that is also something that there are a lot of ceremonies and a lot of events around it. So in those community centers, you can celebrate Jewish life and holidays. You can also follow Jewish traditions, such as the circumcision, which is the procedure that we do on a baby male at the 8 days, to mark him joining the Jewish people. You can do weddings, you can do bar mitzvah, which is also a ceremony that is done at the age of 13 for boys and at the age of 12 for girls, that mark their entering, the mature life. So anything that has to do with the Jewish life cycle also can be done in those Jewish centers. And also they also have a school for Hebrew and Jewish life. So this is what we have. How many Jews are there in China? It's a good question. We don't know. We know that there are about less than a few hundred Israelis. Jews can be of any nation. There are American Jews, Russian Jews, German Jews. And Jews, it's a very, who is a Jew is a very complex question on its own. I would imagine there are a few thousand people that identify as part of the Jewish people that live here for all sorts of reasons, whether they have married locally or they work here or they study here. But they're kind of scattered because they come from different nationalities, but they do have joint religion. So you also asked about synagogues in China. So if I'm really being honest, I don't know exactly where all the synagogues in China located. There are in Shanghai 2 historical synagogues. One of them is within the Jewish Refugee Museum. I don't think it functions as a synagogue today, but it still holds the characteristics of a synagogue that it's worth looking at. And the second one is, of course, Oel Rachel, the historical synagogue that was built in the 1920s by the Jews that came here from Iraq. Beautiful building, very gorgeous, really, a mark of Jewish life in Shanghai. Unfortunately, today it's not doing very well. It needs renovation. And we have tried to look into options on how is it possible to renovate it. It is owned by Shanghai government, so it's under their responsibility. But it is not used regularly for Jewish life. Only a few dates in a year. We have some major holidays that are being celebrated there. The last one, I think, was Passover, which is a very important holiday in the Jewish calendar. That was done in April. That was done in Oel Rachel. We really hope that one day in the future, this synagogue will function as a full-time synagogue, giving service year-round and not just in high holidays. Beside that, I think there is a synagogue in Harbin. I'm not sure about the rest of China. So Israel is a very interesting country as far as religion is concerned. It's actually the center of the three monotheistic religion, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And historically, it always drew attention to it way before the State of Israel was established, just because it holds the major historical centers of Jewish life, Christian life, and Muslim life. So for us, of course, for the Jews, this is the Holy Land. This is the land where Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac came. This is where they established our Jewish faith, really. This is the land that was promised. We are considering ourselves, this is the promised land for the Jewish people, the chosen people. So it is very important historically and as part of our nation. Of course, there is in Israel the West Wall and other very important and significant monuments. For Christianity, this is also the Holy Land. This is where Christianity began. This is where Jesus have lived, was born, walked on water on the Sea of Galilee, and so on and so forth. Was born in Nazareth, passed away in Jerusalem. So there are a lot of relics that are connected to Christian life. And also there is a multitude of churches in Israel. As you may or may not know, in the 19th century, pretty much every major power in the world came and built a church in Jerusalem or some elsewhere. So I'm personally, I was born and raised in Jerusalem, and I'm from Jerusalem, and I know that everywhere you go, you can find a Russian church, or you can find a Catholic church, or you can find a British church, or Anglican church, and so on and so forth. So the variety of Christian life is also pretty astounding, because it's not just one denomination. You have everything in Israel and in Jerusalem. As far as the number of Christians, and I've checked that because you've asked, Right now, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, there are 185,000 Christians living in Israel. About 75% of them are Arab, by ethnical origin, and 25% anything else. It usually would be immigrants or people coming from all over the world that identify as Christians. 185,000 is about a little less than 2% of the population. Again, we're a small country. And they reside for the most part in centers of Christian life, which is Nazareth, Jaffa, Jerusalem also, and places like that. So Christians in Israel tend to be actually quite successful population. They are highly educated, women even more than men, very well integrated into society, and have a very good relations with the rest of society and the government. So all in all, I think Christian life is flourishing in Israel. They have complete freedom of worship and freedom of religion, and I think they practice it. I think it is very important for us, specifically as the Jewish people, since we've been prosecuted for thousands of years because of our religion. It is important for us to allow freedom of religion in our country for any denomination and anyone that is interested. So I did try to check that, and that was a bit difficult to check. We don't have actual Chinese immigration into Israel because our immigration laws are very limited. We do have small communities of Chinese that have wed or married Israeli citizens. So that's a small group of Chinese people that became Israeli nationals through marriage. We also have students that study in Israel, and some of them have remained there for many, many years. And there is also quite a large number of workers that came from China that reside in Israel for limited time periods, 5 years or so, and they work mostly in the construction field in Israel. So that's, I would say, out of all the groups, they are probably the largest group. And they have their own community and life and so on and so forth, but they are not intended to stay in Israel permanently, only for a limited period of time. So, as I mentioned before, since the land of Israel is really the epicenter of Christianity, and in Israel we have the most important sites for Christianity, like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Church in Nazareth, which I'm blanking on its name, and of course the Sea of Galilee, and all those important locations for Christianity. Christian tourism to Israel has always been extremely important. About 50% of all tourists that come to Israel are Christians. And about 15% of those people come specifically for the purpose of pilgrimage in Israel. So we have a very established infrastructure, a tourism infrastructure for the Christian tourist. All the important locations are well organized and for pilgrimage. So Christians that come to Israel really have a very strong emotional experience, witnessing the places where the New Testament had happened. As someone who grew up in Israel and specifically in Jerusalem, I'm very used to seeing pilgrims all over. There is also a very strong Christian presence in Israel. So everywhere you go, you would see monasteries, you would see churches. So you would see missions, accepting pilgrims into them. So it's very convenient to visit Israel. So in that sense. Of course, the Ministry of Tourism and the government on its own have programs to facilitate and support infrastructure for Christian tourism. We participate in, international fairs that are related to that. So this is actually a very important part of the tourism in Israel, and for very good reason. These days are difficult, as you obviously know, ever since October 7th, this horrific day, Israel has been entangled in a war. So these days are difficult for any visitors from anywhere. Even though we do have, I have to say, and this is something very heartwarming, a lot of Christian communities around the world has been incredibly supportive in our strife and in our fight for our quiet existence. And we have seen a lot of Christian groups coming for solidarity visits in Israel, really supporting and really enhancing those relations between the Jewish religion and the Christian religion, which I think it's historical. For many, many years, Christians and Jews were not getting along very well. We have historical phenomena of being persecuted by Christianity, and today I think what we're seeing is really something different. We're seeing friendship and comradeship between the two religions and the two faiths. And those visits and those encouragement coming from Christian communities are very encouraging and very important to us. So I do hope we'll have peaceful days coming. And when they will, of course, we'll be happy to see Christian pilgrimage, Christian visitors to Israel from anywhere in the world, and definitely from China. So again, we need to wait a little for quieter days and more peaceful days, but I do think the potential is huge. COVID has been difficult because during COVID there was no tourism, there was no real cultural exchange because people could not travel back and forth. But just in the year I came here in January 2023, and between January and September we have seen so much going on. We have seen so much interest in visits and cooperation. We've seen so many cultural activity happening. So my hope is that better days will come soon, and we'll be able to see a lot of Chinese tourism coming to Israel. I think Israel, beyond pilgrimage, offers a lot as far as entertainment and culture and weather and scenery and archaeological findings and so much for the Chinese tourists. So I really hope that this will happen and it will increase dramatically. As far as culture is concerned, I think we love one another's culture. We were supposed to have here a few theaters from Israel. The Israeli Philharmonic was supposed to come here. There were so many things that were on the pipe that unfortunately did not happen, but I think they will happen, and I think there is a lot of appreciation and interest in what Israel has to offer. We have wonderful capabilities in the field of classical music, modern dance, world music, jazz, and so on and so forth, which you can offer. And there is a lot of interest and curiosity in Israel about Chinese culture. So we are always interested in seeing culture coming from China, whether it is art or plastic art or relics or craft, but also artists, modern artists, and musicians, and so on and so forth. So I'm very hopeful. I think we have very good basis for collaboration, and I hope we can renew it sooner rather than later. I think religious exchanges are something that happens naturally without the involvement of the state. As the state of Israel, as the government, what we think is very important is to create an atmosphere and to create an infrastructure for religious life, for anyone to have religious life and cooperation. And therefore, we support religious institutions. We make sure that they feel comfortable and free to cooperate with whomever they want and to host them. I also would like to remind you that it's not just Christianity, Islam, and Judaism in Israel. We also have, Israel is also the center of the Baha'i religion. We also have a community of Druze, community of Cherkessi. I mean, there are so many religions that exist in harmony in Israel, and this is where we see our responsibility. So as the government, we want to encourage any kind of collaboration between nations and between people. But religious collaboration, this is really something for the religions themselves to promote, and we will, of course, be happy to support it. So I think it really has to do with Judaism as a religion. Judaism as a religion has always been about education. If people know Judaism, one of the most basic calls in the faith is to learn and to teach your children. So this is a very important part of Judaism, and very, very ultra-Orthodox people, they put their kids at school at the age of 3. Those kids study to read and write at the age of 3. They are very inquisitive. So education is an extremely strong part of the Jewish religion in its core. And this is why I think historically Jews have been very successful in education and in business and in anything that required a lot of knowledge and a lot of education. When the Zionist movement started at the end of the 19th century, it really looked at how do we take our values as Jews and we turn them into a flourishing country. We had this person, his name was Theodor Herzl. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he was a Jewish journalist from Austria, and he was the person that that really dreamt of the Jewish nation. He was the person that kind of worked in order to create a country for the Jews. And he wrote a book about how this country is going to look. And he created this balance between Jewish life, which is, yes, as you mentioned, it's more traditional, it's more conservative, and a very, very modern country with very modern values. That was the way he was thinking. And in reality, when Jews immigrated into Israel, they came from all over the world, and they came with a lot of motivation to create the best country they could, because we didn't have a country for 2,000 years. So they wanted to create something very, very advanced and very progressive. So the balance is not easy. Okay. Sometimes religion does draw you back. But this is a balance that is kept and kept being, talked about and considered in Israel. How do you do this balance? But I can tell you, for example, that my older brother, he's Orthodox Jew, very religious. He keeps Shabbat. He doesn't, turn on the light over the weekend and things like that. But on the other hand, he is an electronics engineer, and he works, developing the most advanced semiconductors. So, this balance exists, and I think one of the important things for us as the Jewish country is to create this balance, maintaining Jewish history and life while having a developed and successful modern country. Well, I think we've always been kind of a problem-solving country because we didn't really have a choice. I mean, from the very establishment of the Jewish state, a day after the establishment of Israel, we started a war. We didn't start a war. A war was started against us. So we really had to fight for our existence from day one. And it wasn't just wars. Israel, if anyone who's visited Israel knows, it's mostly a desert. We didn't have water. We don't have a lot of natural resources. So, they say in the Bible that this is the land of milk and honey. In reality, it's not a very hospitable land. It's very dry. not full of resources. So we really had to find solutions. We were very stubborn, and we came from different parts of the world, and we needed to find solutions. If we didn't have water, we needed to find water solutions. So drip irrigation, for example, was invented in Israel. And, a lot of reverse osmosis desalination process was also invented in Israel. We had a challenge, and, we just found a way to solve it. And, we knew that we had to invest in higher education and research and development. And we had to invest a lot, because in the lack of natural resources, our real natural resource is our mind and our human resources. So we invested a lot into that from the very establishment of the State of Israel, and finding solutions to problems, not just, we never had like a natural progress. We always had we have a problem, let's find a solution. And those solutions, a lot of time, became very cutting edge technologies. Because, for example, the idea of portable memory, what do you do if you need to transfer information from one computer to another? That was, invented in Israel as, a solution to an actual problem that had happened. Waze, for example, the whole idea of navigating as a navigation system, as a social system, how do you call it? Social network, was invented in Israel. Before that you had GPS, people were navigating with GPS. But the idea, okay, we have a problem because GPS does not tell us where is there, traffic jams or problems like that. So let's turn it into, social media. And this was invented in Israel with, Waze, that now it's owned by Google. But things like that, how do we solve actual problems in the world? This is the way technology in Israel has developed. So I can talk a lot about technology in Israel, but if you will really ask me, what is our major strength? I think that's it. We are a problem-solving oriented people. I think in a way, for me as a Jewish person, to talk to Chinese Christians, it's easier because our theology is connected. So our history is somewhat connected. And the conversation is easier. So what I would say is this. First, you are all invited to visit the Holy Land and to see where your history and our history starts and continues. And I hope we'll be able to create this connection between the people and enhance it in the future. And I want to thank anyone that has been very supportive to us in the last 8 months. And, throughout the history of the State of Israel. And I think this connection is really a mark for a better future.